So you just bought your first self-help book, right? And you pick it up, you got it from Amazon, you got it from the store, whatever. You start going through the pages and all of a sudden your brain stops working. You can't process these words. And that could be from, a multitude of factors. But you just can't seem to process this. You want to improve, you want to start your self-help journey. This is where all the information is, but you can't seem to pick any of it up. So we're going to address that today, why you're feeling stuck, why you're bored, why you're finding reading hard. I've gotten a few comments about this recently on my YouTube shorts. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Morgan Holland. I've been in self-help for about 6 years now, and yeah, it's been a journey. I've been doing meditation, weightlifting, journaling, reading self-help, publishing my own self-help books, and just everything you can kind of think of under the sun. So I'm here to address this. I'm here to help out anyone who's trying to start their journey. We're getting into some pretty deep self-help stuff on this channel. We're not just going to be doing this surface level stuff that's going to only peak you so high. So yeah, if you're interested in that, follow along, join the community, and yeah, stay tuned. But yeah, it was only until I was gifted a book, and it was actually this one here, The Power of Now. This was pretty life-changing for me. It's by Eckhart Tolle. That changed my life, I think, for the better for sure. I've focused on his studies for the last 6 years, and it has helped me tremendously. So I do recommend, even though it's hard, it's not going to be easy, it's worth it. This is 100% worth it, especially the realm of philosophy. I think that's extremely worth your time. I dove into this book, and honestly, this was pretty lengthy. I was a terrible reader. My vocabulary was awful. And to be honest with you, this took me 2.5 months to read, and it's only about 200 pages. So for a self-help book, that's pretty good, right? But for any other type of genre, that's really, really short, actually. So this took me a long, long time. But this one over here, this is the 4 agreements. This one took me 1 day, and it was actually because there was a hurricane happening, so the power was out, and I was stuck reading this. But I already had a few years of reading under my belt, so this was a great read. But really, in turn, both of these books are amazing no matter what you start with. Biggest piece of advice I'm going to give you right now is if you want to get into self-help, you want to start reading self-help, but you are seriously struggling with it, you're struggling with your consistency, you're struggling with, just your mental stimulation, read any other genre that finds you, some form of interest. If you're interested in fantasy, more than self-help, I want you to read that fantasy book once or twice, or, read a second book, read a third book even. That will train you to read better for longer periods of time. You need to be actually really, really interested into the topic to read, or else you're going to end up like, me at the start, reading 1 book in 2.5 months, which is pretty slow, to be honest. If you were to read a book you were actually fully interested in, I swear to God, you'd probably read it in like a week or 2, maybe a little more if it's your very first one. So, you've gone through the education system, but you're still struggling with reading, right? And you're kind of questioning why maybe. You went to school, you've been reading for long periods of your life, but as soon as you try to do it on your own time, you just can't, and that's completely normal. I think that we associate school with books and books with school. So obviously, not a lot of people enjoyed going to school. And this just feels like your homework, probably. That's really not a good thing. The second thing I would probably advise is, to try to get off social media as much. Your stimulation's probably pretty messed up from TikTok doom scrolling. We all do it, but we really got to try and tone that down a bit. So the reasons why you're finding it hard to read is the connection to school, maybe some bad habits, bad memories, or, the feeling of it just being homework. And also, your brain is kind of fried, your nervous system is fried from doom scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, video games even, There's definitely small doses of these things that we can do, but it really gets to a point and it's easily overused. I'm not going to advise you to barrel into self-help and, just completely run into this whole new industry of self-help, absorbing all this information at once, and, eventually we'll get there step by step, right? But what I do advise you to do is take baby steps. Start with a different genre if that really, really interests you. But if you're really obsessed with self-help and you really want to get into it, maybe pick a shorter book, maybe something a little shorter than 200 pages. Something, if you find just a small book and it's still 200 pages, there's less words on those books for you to read because the pages are smaller, right? Like, for example, if this book was thicker than this book in comparison, this would still have less words because it is way, way smaller. So, you know, that can be kind of deceiving. Try to find a small, thin book for you to read. This is a perfect first step. But even then, I don't want you to read this whole thing in a day, like I did, you know, but I was kind of stuck inside. Anyways, besides the point, I want you to start with 1 page a day, maybe even less. If it's that bad for you, start with 2 sentences a day. Start with anything, because slow progress is better than no progress. And that's kind of the theme of this, right? Is that if you can just start, then you did something great. If you just do nothing, you do nothing your whole life, you never start, you don't know what could have become. You know, you could have gotten so interested in reading, you published your own book like I did. So, you know, let's say you decided to go get a book and, you know, you're still struggling with it, you've been doing this for a while. There's alternatives to this. If you're really glued to your phone and you need to still, you know, try and stimulate your brain that way, there's online books. You can read online. They're actually way cheaper too. There's Audible books. You know, Audible's a great website. They're all just audio driven. I have a version of my book on there, but there's plenty of others. Pretty much every single book out there has an Audible version. And that's pretty good. You know, some people learn through reading. Some people want to, you know, be told though. Some people want to listen. So if you're really, really struggling and you think it's not for you, I assure you one of these formats of books can help you out. One of these formats are going to help you learn. We sort of need to think about the importance of reading, right? You know, why are we doing this? Well, you want to improve or you want entertainment, but you know, it's kind of hand in hand. It's nice. You're going to improve no matter what you read. But if you want to improve your life a little more, self-help is kind of the, you know, best genre for that. That's its whole purpose, right? Well, why don't we just not read anything? Why don't we just go through life, you know, trying to learn on our own? And that's fine, you know, you can do that. But this, I swear to God, this will fast track your progress faster than anything. This is twice as fast. And the reason for that being is, you know, this person who wrote this book, or any book, they all made mistakes, right? We learned from our mistakes. Well, books, all these pages here, these are all mistakes someone has made, and they're here to teach you these mistakes so that you don't make them. Some, you know, huge mistakes, like in The Power of Now, he was homeless for, you know, at least a year or two before he discovered, you know, his ability to connect to the present moment. And that was sort of the whole theme of that book, right? So, for example, that was a huge mistake in his life, but it granted him a great gift. He's now teaching you that gift, that you don't have to go through all that trial and error. That reward is right there for you to learn. And he tells you how, he tells you why, he tells you everything. Reading these books grants you such a great amount of, like, a time skip almost in your life. You just discovered, you know, how to connect to the present moment, and it took this guy his whole life to do it. He had to be homeless to figure that out. You know what I mean? So you avoid so many mistakes, so many trial and error moments. Now, if we want to summarize a bit here, what I'm trying to tell you is that this is a skill that you can build in time. It takes consistency, it takes discipline, and it takes patience. It's a hard thing to do. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but this is worthwhile. People spend their whole lives reading every single day. They don't even have a TV, they don't have an Xbox or something. They just read, and I admire that a ton. You know, I do that myself usually. But this is worthwhile. This is what's going to really promote growth in your mind. You know, this will translate to your life. This will help you succeed. This is important. Start with a different genre. You know, if self-help bores you and you want to get better at reading so your mind can actually, you know, take in all this knowledge first, you can understand the words, you can fluently read. Read a different genre or any topic that interests you. Once you're kind of down with that, get into some self-help. But choose a small book. Choose something very small, very thin, okay? And most self-help books are pretty right, you know? Like, always, you know, think of non-biased opinions and biased opinions and kind of decide for yourself if that's really what you know, connect with. Really do anything that you put your mind to. Like, if you're struggling to read a book, you can learn to read that book. You know, you can learn the value of this and you can practice this. This is a skill. You know, some people are born, you know, with this skill and they easily adapt. Some people don't. But that doesn't mean that they can't reap from the same benefits. You are just as deserving to get these benefits as anyone else. It may take a little time, but who knows, maybe you'll become, you know, better at reading, maybe you'll find that discipline, find that consistency, and you will learn a lot from those. If anyone has any questions, you know, they want to comment on a different topic, I'll make a video on anything you have to ask me. I'm open to any suggestions. I'd like to make this a whole series. I'd like to start a community of people that want to get into self-help and get really, deeply involved in it. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, reach out, like, follow, subscribe, and yeah, check it out and join the community.